SOFAYGO is an artist that's honestly confused me for a while, being somebody who blew up extremely late in the SoundCloud wave in the year 2021, almost 2 years after everybody thought it was dead and gone. But not only did Fago find a way to blow up into the mainstream rap game, but he was also able to pioneer an entirely new genre of rap known as rage that would become so prevalent and popular over the coming years that he basically became the father of his own genre. But the problem is he didn't keep his foot on the pedal and keep making new music in that same genre, taking a very big break between 2021 and 2022, and because of that, other rappers like Yeet, Ken Carson, and basically everybody from Opium would take his sound and then run off with it, which led a lot of people to think, what happened? Why did he stop dropping music for so long? And where did he even come from in the first place? Because it almost felt like he blew up overnight, despite the fact that he was actually grinding in the underground for quite a long time. So let's find that all out when we look into the story of SOFAYGO. But before we jump into it, I want to give a quick shout out to my Patreons. I'm going to read all their names off at the end of the video, so if you're interested in listening to that and becoming one yourself, stick around to the end. But for now, let's get into the story. Andre Dortel Burt Jr. was born October 3rd, 2001 in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which makes him 22 years old at the time that I'm recording this video, which when you think about it, basically gives him unk status in the underground scene. I mean, I'm 23 years old and I really gotta go start a family, so he's gotta get one started too. Either way though, he wouldn't stay in Grand Rapids for long, with him and his family moving to Atlanta when he was still pretty young, spending most of his life there. And once he arrived, it wasn't long before his parents realized that he was very different from the rest of the kids, because very similarly to Ian Dior and Wi-Fi's funeral, he would tell his mother at a young age that he wanted to be famous, and she would immediately tell him hell no, that he had to get a 9 to 5, live a normal life, and being famous was not a dream that he should chase. Which is definitely pretty harsh considering his age, but do keep in mind most parents probably don't want their kid to become a rapper. It's not that they don't want them to be famous or live that life, it's because most rappers end up like Sleepy Casper, Little Slump, Jumix, people like that. I mean, I always talk about the ones that actually make it, but there's more that don't make it than do. But at first, Fago didn't even want to be a rapper. He actually wanted to be a professional dancer, signing up for a bunch of dance competitions during his younger years before realizing that he was a bit too shy and anxious to actually perform in front of so many people, so instead, he decided to start rapping. Although at first it really wasn't that serious considering he was only in the 4th grade and it was his cousin who first convinced him to start rapping in the first place. Unfortunately, we don't have any of this music to listen to because he never dropped any of it, being too shy to put it out into the world at that point, but from what he described, it wasn't even really rapping, it was more so singing, with him talking about girls, candy, and basically a bunch of little kid stuff. But either way, we can't listen to it, so let's move on. At this point, you can start to see a pattern with Fago where he really wanted to stand out and do something creative, but at the same time he was struggling with being too shy to really put himself out there, with a lot of his friends around the time describing him as a kid that would only speak when he was spoken to. But despite that, he kept trying to push out of his comfort zone, eventually auditioning for the school play, which unfortunately he didn't make it into, but at least he tried. And after that event, he completely gave up his dream of wanting to be an actor. I don't know if I mentioned that he wanted to be an actor, but apparently that's something he wanted to do as well. And once he finally got to grade 9, he would then pick up basketball. Now, it's uncertain if he had dreams of getting into the NBA at this point. He probably did. I mean, most kids who play basketball in high school want to get to college ball before then making it into the NBA, but it seems like that dream wouldn't come true either, with him officially putting it down in grade 10 to fully dedicate himself to becoming a rapper. But it's not like he was jumping into rap completely blind, because he was actually a pretty big fan of both Drake and Chris Brown, with him studying both their come-ups and careers in hopes of mimicking them and recreating it for himself. And on top of that, he would also start to get a lot more dedicated to fashion, being heavily inspired by Ian Connor, which, if you're not sure who that is somebody who used to be in Playboy Carti's camp, so you can see that the Carti influence was there from an early age. And on top of completely changing the way that he would dress, he would also dye his dreads pink, which apparently pissed off a lot of people in his high school. I'm not really sure why that is, but if I had to guess, once he started standing out more, he made a lot of people uncomfortable and they wanted to tear him down a peg, so they would always try to get up in his face and fight, but for the most part, he still stayed low-key and kept working on his craft. And by the time he dropped his first official song, it was 2015, which is actually pretty early in the SoundCloud wave. I mean, it was definitely getting established at this point, but I would have thought somebody like him would have only started making music in 2018 to 2019, so apparently SOFAYGO is a bit more of an OG than I initially thought. But anyways, his first ever track that he officially dropped on SoundCloud was called Pound Cake, which at this point is unfortunately lost, so we have to look at his next release to really see what his music sounded like at the time. Although before we get to the real stuff, we got to take a bit of a side quest, because it turns out the SOFAYGO, who at the time was going as Trill Venice, I think that's how you say it, actually got his start in the world of music by promoting himself on a hip-hop roleplay Roblox server. Yeah, that's right, that was called Trill House. And when he was running the server, he would go under the name Bloody Santos, which initially was only his name on Roblox, but surprisingly, he did drop a couple tracks under that name. I found an entire project that he deleted off of his own SoundCloud, but was re-uploaded on an archive page called Real Santos, which when you listen to, you can tell that he was either really young when making this or he wasn't taking it seriously, because it's a bunch of god-awful music that was made to diss his ops on Roblox. He also had a Twitter account where he would diss his ops on Roblox, so overall, he definitely has credentials in the street. But as goofy as this all sounds, that Roblox server was actually pretty popular, and with him promoting his music on there so heavily, he would gain a cult fan base that would carry with him throughout the rest of his career. As the years went on, he would drop sporadically. There is a couple projects from around the time that are still available now called Trillis Enemy, as well as another project called Hurt Heart. Which is a lot more melodic than the rest of his music, so you can definitely see that he was treading towards that direction in his early days, before eventually moving into that full Cartinese style that he would become popular for, which eventually everybody gets lost in, let's be honest. But the moment that would finally get him to take hip-hop seriously and try to pursue it as a full-on job is once he actually got a 9-to-5 working at KFC, and after being there for a couple weeks, realizing how he was treated, realizing how bad the conditions were, and the fact that he barely made any money whatsoever, he realized he couldn't do this for the rest of his life and fully decided to become a rapper. So he immediately hopped on YouTube and started scouring for the best beats that he could possibly find, eventually getting connected to a producer known as Polak, who quickly became his mainstay producer, creating some of the tracks that would get him his initial buzz on SoundCloud. Now around this time it was 2017, which was basically the peak of the SoundCloud wave. I mean, 2018 is when it went fully mainstream and took over the entire game, but at that point, if you weren't already popping, there wasn't a whole lot of hope that you would be able to break through and join the crowd. So Chilvanese would immediately start putting in that work, dropping tracks like hits on hits, chopping melodies, and do that. Which of course he would delete off of his SoundCloud after he finally blew up, but luckily for us, we can find a lot of his early music on archive pages, and according to his producer Polak, a lot of these early tracks got about 2,000 to 4,000 plays in a couple weeks, which is pretty decent considering how oversaturated the app was during that period. After that, he would drop his final mixtape under the name Chilvanese called Goonland, which actually included a song called Arm and Leg, which of course is a remix of a Playboi Carti song, so once again you can really see that early influence there. With him finally changing his name to SOFAYGO after this point, and really there's not too deep of a meaning behind that name. Basically he was in his room, he got really high, he looked at a Faygo bottle and said, you know what, that's what I'm gonna run with. He also had another name change after that point, calling himself Beezy during 2018, although there's only one track that actually has that new name on it, and that was during the time that he was running with a group called Half Evil. Now this would mostly be a side quest, but there was actually two members of this group that became pretty prominent in their own ways. The first being Guwap Rain, which was a close associate of Little Tekka, with him even getting a verse on Burgle World, which is a pretty big accolade for an underground rapper who didn't have a whole lot of clout before that point, as well as a producer in the group known as Midas 800, who actually made the beat for Annalie Chopper's song Shot of Flow, which is actually the initial track that blew him up in the first place. So SOFAYGO was making some pretty good connections even early on in his career. After that, he would drop his first project under the name SOFAYGO called We Are Aliens, which definitely feels a lot more in line with the music that he would get known for, so it seems like he had finally found himself musically and was ready to start really making noise. And on top of that, he would finally graduate high school in 2019 before dropping his breakthrough project called War, with one track in particular called Clutch going on to get 10k plays in a couple weeks, getting him noticed by artists like Little Candy Paint, who's somebody who actually used to live with Trippie Redd and Little Wop. He's actually a pretty important figure in the underground scene in general who never gets his flowers, so if you want to see a video on him, definitely let me know. He also got noticed by another smaller artist known as K Suave, who would later sign to Trippie Redd, so it definitely seemed like Faygo was making the right connections to orbit bigger rappers, but the one artist that really helped him out the most was known as Pasto Flaco. First of all, he had a really decent fan base of his own that was pretty cult-like, and on top of that, he also played basketball with Little Tekka when the two of them used to be in high school, so overall, this was a good connection to have. And together, Faygo and Flaco would drop tracks like Double R, Energy, and Pop Out, which all did really well on SoundCloud and eventually caught the attention of somebody who worked at LMO Records named Lamar Jazz. And it seems like Lamar really saw something in Fago because he would get him a meeting at Alamo Records in hopes of getting him a record deal, but unfortunately it didn't go as well as he had hoped, and Fago was left to return to the underground to keep grinding it out and hopefully get another chance. But luckily for Fago, he still had those couple connections to Little Tekka, who at the time was the biggest artist in the game as well as an aspiring producer, and somehow he managed to get on a FaceTime call with him, and the two of them would get to work on a track known as Knock Knock, which you probably already know is the track that would eventually blow him up into the mainstream, but this was 2019, not 2021, because this track was pretty similar to Look at Me by XXXTentacion. Not in the way that it sounded, it definitely doesn't sound anything like X, but in the way that after it dropped, it initially got some attention, but wouldn't fully blow up until a couple years later. Once Fago dropped it on his SoundCloud, it would get a couple thousand plays, before Tekka would then share a snippet on his Twitter of Fago dancing to the song, which of course would get it even more plays, although the Twitter snippet was more popular than the actual track itself. But at that point, it was sitting at a solid 50k, definitely bigger than everything SOFAYGO had seen before that point, but definitely not mainstream numbers by any stretch of the imagination. But luckily, Tekka and Fago's connection wouldn't fade away after that point, with them dropping an entire project in 2020 called Angelic 7, which could be compared to Tokyo's own project called 7, although I don't think anybody wants to be compared to him at this point. But basically what I'm saying is it was a whole bunch of different sounds all put together on one project to kind of give a serving platter of everything that Fago could do, and he was finally starting to switch up his style a bit. Soon after this, the pandemic would break out, which was surprisingly a pretty good thing for Fago because his parents really wanted him to go to college, but now that he was in lockdown, he actually had a reason to sit home all day and make music full time. And not to mention, TikTok was really starting to buzz, and both Knock Knock as well as Clutch would start to get attention on that app, giving him more numbers on SoundCloud. And with all this new motion and connections to big time artists like Tekka, he decided to move out to New York and ask Lamar to be his manager for real this time, which he accepted. And after that, it was only a matter of time before Knock Knock really started to do numbers on TikTok, finally blowing up and becoming one of the most used songs on the app during 2021. But before we get to that, I can't deny the work that Fago was putting out in 2020, actually dropping 5 whole projects, starting off with 7 of course, followed up by a project that was named The Reveal, then we got For You, Web, and finally After Me, which was a complete switch up from his normal Carti style. And this is really the project that a lot of people say started off the entire Rage wave. I'm not really sure if that's true or not. Some people say it's Whole Lotta Red by Playboi Carti. Some people say it is, some people say it's not. But either way, it seemed like Fago had found something that was very popular and he was about to take over the year 2021. With Fago immediately getting cosigns from both Trippie Redd as well as Travis Scott, which were definitely both very helpful for him considering the fact that he would later sign to Cactus Jack. But what he didn't realize is now that Trippie Redd was aware of this style, he had plans to make his own project in a similar sound. Now, I'm not saying that Trippie bit Fago or ran off with the style or stole anything from him. All I'm saying is that Trippie was a lot bigger of an artist at the time, so if Fago wanted to capitalize on the sound that he started off, he would have to drop a project very soon. Because after all, not everybody's tapped in with the underground, so if Trippie Redd came out with a commercial album that sounded like that, a lot of people were going to say that Trippie was the father of Rage, which eventually became true. And luckily for Fago, it seemed like a very good idea to sign to Cactus Jack because immediately after doing so, he would get that connection to Cole Bennett, get a Lyrical Lemonade video for the track Knock Knock, and then blow up into the mainstream. And you would think after that, the label would get him ready to drop his debut album. After all, SOFAYGO definitely had some music saved up considering just how much he was dropping during 2020, but for one reason or another, the label didn't drop right away and in fact made him wait almost an entire year. And during that period, Trippie Redd would drop his track I Miss the Rage featuring Playboi Carti, which became a massive hit, probably one of the biggest songs of 2021, and meanwhile, Fago just wasn't dropping anything. And this wasn't like somebody like Little Tekka who was at least dropping a couple singles a year, just wasn't really dropping a massive project. SOFAYGO actually wasn't dropping anything. Nothing on SoundCloud, nothing on Spotify, no music videos. Basically, his fans were starving at this point. And as the year went on, the style got more and more popular, with Trippie Redd finally dropping Trip at Night, followed up by Lil Uzi Vert getting on the trend, Little Skies would hop on it. Basically, every new artist in the game would get into it, and then of course, Ken Carson and Destroy Lonely would come into the game as well. During the period that SOFAYGO wasn't dropping music, the style would become the most popular thing in the game before quickly becoming oversaturated, old, and tired, and by the time that he finally did drop his project in 2022, it seemed like people didn't care anymore. I'm not really sure if this was because of the whole Astroworld tragedy with Travis Scott having to stay out of the public eye for a couple months so people would forget about it. Maybe that's why SOFAYGO didn't drop. Maybe it was supposed to be kind of a mysterious Playboi Carti type of thing where they thought fans would want to wait around for the music, but considering he was a brand new artist artist not dropping seemed like a very bad idea. He would go to Rolling Loud that year and get an interview with the Cuff Boy's mom. It seems like at this point, Cuff Boy's mom is basically the new No Jumper. It doesn't seem like any artist post 2020 even bothers to go there anymore. I'm not really sure if that's because they kind of fell off or maybe they think that they don't need No Jumper anymore, but I always feel like a good interview with them really helps an artist out. I know this is going to be an unpopular opinion. Adam22 definitely is a weird cuck, but he's definitely a talented interviewer at the same time and can really pull out some good questions and help people feel a lot more comfortable with artists that they priorly didn't know a lot about. But honestly, what am I saying? We're in that new era, that mysterious era, where artists can't show too much of themselves, they can't show too much of their life or talk too much about where they came from because then fans are actually going to relate to them and like them. They need to stay mysterious. They got to be like Playboy Carti. Let me tell you something, there's really only one Playboy Carti. The only reason that it works so well for him is because he dropped such good music during 2017 and 2018 that he was able to take that break in between with fans really waiting to see what he would come out with next. Not to mention every time that Carti drops, fans can't wait to hear what will come next because he usually always comes out with a new style of music or something different, where when SOFAYGO finally did drop a project in June of 2022 called Before Pink, it was basically the same style that we were already used to, only a year too late. But it seems like Faygo was just as tired of not dropping music as everybody else because he actually ended up leaking one of his entire projects on a SoundCloud that his fans would trace back to him called Baby Jack, which a lot of people really seem to enjoy, but once again, too little too late. And even after that project leaked, we then have to wait another 6 months until December 2022 when he finally dropped his debut album called Pink Hearts. And when it finally did come out, it only got 7K first week sales. That's right, it sold that bad. Just to put that in perspective, that's less than Total Xanarchy, that's less than Life of a Dark Rose, that's less than Industry Plant by Ian Dior. It's actually almost as bad as Florida Chip by Smoke Perp. It only sold like 2K more copies than that flop. So by all accounts, this album was an absolute flop, and by early 2023, the label knew they had to take him in a new direction or he was going to completely fall off. In early 2023, he would drop a YouTube and SoundCloud exclusive project called Extra for All My Dogs, so it seems like SOFAYGO really was trying to get music out to his fan base, but the label just wasn't letting him. But luckily for fans, he would start dropping music videos as well as singles on his YouTube channel at this point, which all sit from around 500,000 to 1 million views each, which definitely isn't bad for an upcoming artist like him, although he has been in the game for a couple years at this point, so he should be doing slightly better, I think. I mean, you can tell all that time away from making music definitely hurt his momentum. He would appear on the XSL freshman list in 2022, although at this point nobody really cares about that list anymore, so it didn't really move the needle one way or another. In 2023, we get another project called Go Plus, which doesn't have any first week sales data, so I'm not really sure how it sold, but it seems like fans are enjoying him dropping music a lot more often now. I'm pretty sure he's still with Cactus Jack at this point, but the label must be giving him a little bit more freedom because he has been dropping more mixtapes, more singles, but like Lil Xan said when I talked to him, usually mixtapes are more controlled by the artist than the label themselves, so when it comes to his next big project, fans are still waiting. And I'm going to end this video off by answering the question that a lot of people ask me in the comments: why do labels make artists wait so long before they drop a project? Well, it's basically as simple as this. First of all, when you sign to a label, you can't really drop music the same way that you used to because everything has to be a lot more professional. Producers got to get paid, engineers got to get paid, samples got to get cleared, and all of that takes a while. So what used to be a pretty simple process of finding a YouTube beat, rapping over it, sending it to your producer to mix and master, and then drop it on SoundCloud is now a lot more complex because you got to make sure that everybody's good legally and nobody's going to get sued when the song comes out. On top of that, you got to factor in marketing because now that you're with a label, you got to compete with mainstream people, so they got to put a lot of money into marketing you in the right way, putting you on Spotify playlists, getting you interviews, putting you in the right spots to be marketed in the right way. And at the same time, most labels really like new artists because they have a lot of buzz going for them. Usually the artist has a big breakthrough hit that's making them a lot of money, the label ends up signing, marketing it for them, and then taking a lot of the royalties. After that, they try to get them set up in the industry, but before long, another big time artist comes with a hit that they want to make the money off of, they end up shelving the prior artist and moving on to the next thing. That's basically how the music industry works at this point. The label basically milks you for everything you're worth, capitalizes off your buzz, and then leaves you high and dry to move on to the next big thing. That's basically how it goes every single time. And a lot of these artists don't really know how to market themselves or how to get their music out there, or really how to operate in the industry whatsoever, so it takes them time to learn, and by the time they fully realize how to do it, they've already lost their initial buzz and they're left as SOFAYGO, an artist who hasn't really fallen off, but also definitely lost a lot of traction during the time that he wasn't dropping. So that might have been what happened to SOFAYGO, could have been something completely different, but if I had to speculate, that would be my guess. So with all that said, I definitely hope that SoFaygo can make a comeback. I mean, people like Ken Carson and Destroy Lonely are huge in the industry right now, so there's no reason that SoFaygo shouldn't be selling out stadiums as well. But if I were to give him any advice, it would be to put himself out there a lot more. Stop trying to be so mysterious and really connect with fans, go out to shows and show them more of your personality. I know he's a very shy kid, and having all these crazy fans constantly be around him probably gives him some anxiety, but that's the life of being an artist. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want to be famous, you got to be fully famous. If you want to be mysterious, well, you're going to fade off because you can't be both. But with all that said, let me know who you want to see next. I can definitely keep moving into this more new generation wave of rappers, or I can go back in time a little bit and talk about some older guys too. But just let me know who you want to see. And while you're down there, subscribe to the channel too. Trying to get to 20K, really want to get to 20K. And now I'm going to shout out my patrons. Shout out to William Collins, Liam Campbell, and of course, Crusader Official. You guys are the real homies, really supporting the channel and helping me do what I'm doing. And with all that said, if you want to join too, it's only $1 a month, and it really helps me continue to make these videos at the rate that I'm making them. But besides that, shout out Knife Gang. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Peace.